Welcome, everybody. Thank you for sharing your time with us on this lovely Sunday afternoon. We've got a wonderful team here to present to you today. First of all is myself. I'm your MC. My name is Robin Barker. I'm a master food preserver. We have Marina Shea, who's our Q&A moderator, and our three panelists, Betty Isaias, Jadrian Johnson, and then me again. We're all master food preservers. Note that a copy of this slide deck and a recipe handout will be emailed to attendees who complete the post-event survey. We have a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted when not speaking. When we invite live questions, you're welcome to unmute and speak up or raise your Zoom hand. You can find your Zoom hand under the React button along the bottom of your screen. At any time, you are welcome to submit questions or comments in writing to the Zoom Q&A feature. You open this from the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see Q&A on your bar, click More, then select Q&A from the pop-up menu. During the open discussion, you're welcome just to speak up. The UC MFP online program is a community outreach, online-based, grant-funded volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources that provides up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. Our mission is to keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate, research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but recognize that we are all volunteers. We don't speak for the University of California in an official capacity, and we don't endorse or impose any specific organization, service, or product. So if you see a specific piece of equipment in a photo or live or a brand of food or whatever, we are not endorsing that specific product or brand. Today's program has three elements. We're first going to start with Betty, who's going to talk about preserving watermelon rind in a sugar syrup. And then we have Jadrian Johnson, who is going to speak about frozen grapes. And finally, we'll end up with me speaking about strawberry fruit leather. So I am going to turn things over to Betty.
Hi, my name is Betty Isaias. I'm happy to speak to you today about watermelon rinds and sugar syrup. It's a great way to make good use of these excess of all the watermelon we're eating at this time of year. So we'll have this recipe sent to you at the end of the class. There's a brief review there of what we have, but it's a really great way, again, just to reduce the food waste that we have. In this time of year, watermelon is pretty abundant. So to prepare, you'll trim the green skin and pink flesh from the watermelon rind, cut it into 1-inch pieces. Now, to note here that this is something that we're taught, and it's really good teaching moment as well, is we're told to read the recipe 3 times, multiple times to make sure that we don't miss anything. And in preparing this, I made a mistake and I left the rind on, and so those things will happen. And so one thing I will state is that what we teach is that we are to follow tested recipes. So this changes the recipe a bit. And so I will say that, you know, in going through the actual process, you would peel the rinds and you would process this as I'm going to go through, and it would be shelf stable. But in this case, given that I did process initially with the rind on, that you would go through and do it as a canning, I guess you would call it a failure, and put it in the fridge, and it's still good, but you would want to use it in a much shorter period of time. And you'll preserve it that way. I don't have control. Are you able to change the slide? I don't have control anymore. Next slide. So once you have your pieces cut, you'll dissolve from the recipe the salt in 2 quarts of water and pour it over the rind. You let that stand for 5 to 6 hours in the refrigerator. Drain it, rinse, and drain again. Next slide, please. Then you'll cover with cold water and let that stand for 30 minutes. Drain that, and then you'll sprinkle ginger over the rind, cover with water, and then cook until tender and drain. Next slide. So, just with the cooking piece, I will say that the recipe does state to cook it until it becomes translucent. Of course, that's not going to happen with the rind on. So just know you can stick a fork through it. There's another test, and then with the translucent piece will just be it'll depend on how thick you cut the rind, whereas it'll become clear without the green portion. So to actually make the preserves, we'll sterilize the canning jars, and then you'll combine the sugar, lemon juice, 7 cups of water. You'll boil that for 5 minutes, and then you'll add the rind and boil that gently for another 30 minutes. And then the sliced lemon is optional. I thought it gave it a really nice flavor. Again, it's something if you would want. And then you'll cook it until the melon rind is clear. And then you'll pack the hot preserves into hot jars, leaving a 1/4 inch headspace. And I will just make mention on the lemon juice. The overriding preservation technique would be the sugar, which is going to help eliminate the water for contamination. So typically we use commercial lemon because it's fresh lemon is not consistent in its acidity. So just making mention of that there. Next slide, please. And then again, once you process, you'll wipe the rims, adjust the lids, so you wipe the rims so that there's nothing that's going to interrupt the seal. And you'll process it in 5 minutes in a boiling water bath. And that's another preservation technique that'll make this more food safe. Next slide, please. And then the final steps, when the water boils, you'll set the timer for 5 minutes, and you'll keep it at a gentle, steady boil, and then adjust for elevations. You'll see at the bottom there the elevations, depending on where you're at, which the processing time is. And at the completion, you'll turn it off, remove the canner lid, and you let it sit for 5 minutes. And that allows the product to settle. And then you will then remove the jars, And then make sure you'll keep them upright to not, not potentially have a failed seal. And then you'll carefully place them on a towel, cooling wrench. You want a little bit of space in between so they cool evenly. And you want to avoid having them in a cool surface or cold draft so that they evenly cool. And then after 12 hours, you'll check the seal. And that's just making sure that that top piece of the metal is secure on the jar. Jars that fail to seal can be refrigerated and used within a few weeks, so they can be frozen. And that's what I did with my process. As you see here, I left the rind on, and I will say it was very tasty. Even with the rind, I don't think it was an issue as far as taste goes. And then you can use these like on a charcuterie board, on your toast. It's really great with cheese. It's a really soft, lovely flavor. Thank you. Next slide. Any questions?
So I don't see anything in the Q&A right now. Just a reminder that if you do have questions at any point throughout the program, please just type them right into the Q&A. But during this open time, feel free to just unmute and speak up. Or you can raise your little Zoom hand first, but we have time if anyone has questions for Betty about her preserves.
Okay.
I actually have a question for the attendees, which is, has anyone ever made either watermelon preserves like this, or for that matter, watermelon rind pickles? Monique says yes. What have you done, Monique?
All of the
Was
above.
that
All of the above. They're really, really good.
That's
Yeah.
great. Laura, I see your hand.
Yeah, I've done pickles before, but I'm wondering how Betty likes to use her pickles or these preserves, I mean, not pickles.
Yeah, on cream cheese, it's really nice. Or on toast. It's a really, really soft, it's a really different flavor. It tastes like watermelon, and then with the lemon, it adds a little tartness, which I think is nice.
I can't help but feel I would want to spoon these over like a beautiful bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Well, there you go. That sounds really nice right now.
I see a hand from Zoom user.
Oh, sorry, I didn't put my name. My name's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
I just made watermelon rind pickles. I used the official recipe and I found them too sweet. It called for 9 cups of sugar and about 6 pounds of rind. So is it possible to back off on the sugar, or is that the primary preservation method? Yeah.
Do you want to take that?
I can jump in on that. It really is the primary preservation method on this particular preserves recipe. And so the sugar, as with jams, it binds essentially with the water in a way that makes the water less available for all the other little happy microbes and bacteria that you don't want to have grow to get moisture to grow. And so it is a way of helping preserve food. And in this recipe, it is the sort of the syrup that is part of the safety. And so you don't mess with it. You may have had the same reaction I've had to some jam recipes where it's just like, holy cow, how can you possibly ask me to put that much sugar in? But it is the preservation method, and the tested recipes test at that level. So if you want, for example, a low sugar jam, you would literally use a low sugar pectin and use a recipe that's designed for that.
Right. Thank you very much.
We have a few questions in the Q&A now. What's your headspace?
Headspace is a mouse of space that is, you use, so when you're filling the jar, you want to leave a little space to allow for the product to expand and move. So that you don't crack your jars or that you're not just, it's overfilled and then it's gonna be coming out in the water and the oil, so. Again, these are trusted recipes, and so, we have there's instruments you can use, which I don't have one just this second. But there are, things that you can purchase that will measure it for you. It's a little plastic, kind of, piece that will, yeah, it's it's like stairs, I guess. I don't know how to explain it.
And
And what was the headspace in this recipe? I missed it and I was really curious because you said if the seal fails, it can go straight into the freezer, which had me immediately thinking it might be too high and could risk breaking the glass.
Right, it's a,
oh, interesting. The recipe in this particular case calls for a 1/4 inch headspace, which is, quite high.
right.
Betty, you have a question. Did you use fresh or dried ginger?
I use dried ginger.
Great. And Monique asked, is the sliced lemon discarded before canning, or can you add it to 1 or 2 of the jars also?
I added it to the jars.
Wonderful. Well, I don't see other questions at this moment in Q&A. And so at this point, we can always take more questions at the end. But Linda, is your hand up from before, or is it, do you have a new question?
From
Okay,
before, sorry.
No problem. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Robin. Robin, you're muted.
I think I'm just going to dispense with sharing my screen again. Well, I do have a title for Jadrian, but I think that I can probably just introduce him orally. So, Jadrian, I'm going to, okay, it jumped. I'm going to spotlight you. And I also need to spotlight your Grape Cam. If you were thinking that perhaps we had somebody here named Grape Cam, I lied.
Well,
It's
just
Grape
tell
Cam.
you about that now. Thank you, Robin. Hello, friends. Super excited to welcome you today. This is a fantastic class, I think, exploring all of the beautiful fruits of summer that are out there for us. And today, specifically, I'm here to talk a little bit about kind of one of my personal unsung heroes of food preservation. I think oftentimes when we think about preserving food, we think about some of these more complex techniques requiring, processing of your ingredients, processing of your vessels, etc. And we often forget that there is kind of a champion of food preservation in most of our kitchens, and that is our trusty freezer. And what I love about freezing as a food preservation method is, it's widely available. The techniques to prepare fruits and vegetables for your freezer are relatively simple and straightforward. And it kind of allows you to really preserve the fruits and vegetables at the peak of their ripeness and flavor. And I don't know about all of you all, but in California, we are kind of just getting into these dog days of summer. Looking ahead, September, October, we're going to have some of the hottest days ahead. And one of the things that I love on a hot day like this is something cold, refreshing, with a little bit of bite. So today I'm bringing my recipe for frozen sour grapes, which is a fantastic, very simple, very kid-friendly recipe that you can do with common ingredients you find in your pantry and grapes from the supermarket. So we are starting here. As you can see, I've got about a cup of, these are green grapes, but you can use almost any grape that you want. And before this class, I had rinsed these in cool water after having plucked them off of the stems. And when you're choosing your grapes, you really want to make sure that you're choosing the plump grapes that don't have any bruises, that are nice and big, really at that right peak of ripeness. So what I've got in with these grapes here, these have been sort of bathed in a bit of lemon juice. And in this recipe, because we're using freezing as the preservation, the lemon juice can be either fresh squeezed or you can use a canned available lemon juice that you would find at the supermarket. It's really here to just add a little bit of zing. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that your grapes, kind of spoon these around, but make sure they've all got kind of a little bit of lemon juice on them. And I got this great trick from Marina. I've got a bowl here. This is kind of the key of the entire recipe. This bowl is a combination of sugar as well as food grade citric acid. And in this case, I'm using a ratio of about 2.5 teaspoons of citric acid to 1/4 cup of sugar. I have pre-whisked this in advance, and I will say that is one of the key tips that I can give you when you're making this recipe at home. Because citric acid and sugar look almost identical, you want to make sure that you give them a very thorough whisk in your bowl, just to make sure that they're well combined and that you're not biting into a grape that is entirely covered in citric acid. So we've got this combination here. What you'll want to do then is I'm going to use a small strainer for this. You want to take out your grapes, just kind of a small bunch at a time. And thanks to Marina, this is a fantastic tip. I pop them into a separate bowl, and I'm just going to spoon a little bit of that mixture over them directly. We're going to toss those around just to get a really nice thorough coat. You see they kind of get a nice sort of crystalline shimmer when they're really well covered. And we'll remove those to a foil or parchment lined tray. You do want to make sure that you're using a tray or cookie sheet that's sized to fit in your freezer after this. So probably one thing that you want to check before. And we'll continue to do this with a few of these small grapes. Now, one of the things I really love about this recipe is its ease. It makes it a wonderful recipe to make at home using common ingredients found in your pantry. And it's also really friendly for little helpers in the kitchen that might be curious about cooking or food preservation as well. So I'll give these ones a little toss too. Again, what we're looking for is that really great kind of crystalline coat. Now, as has been mentioned, you'll get a copy of this recipe when you fill out the survey at the end of the class. But if you want to find similar recipes like this in the future or be getting them on a bit of a regular basis, I highly recommend that you subscribe to our MFP newsletter. This is a great monthly source of recipes, how-tos, techniques, and tips, and also profiles of the different MFPs who are in the program. So really great for regular inspiration as you're thinking about new ways to preserve or trying to sort of expand on your existing knowledge. Now, I'm making a bit of a small batch here today, but one thing I will note, over time, as you're sort of dusting your wet grapes in this sugar, you'll notice it'll start to get a bit of a sandy texture. When it starts to do that, it's a little bit less likely to stick to your damp grapes. So you may find that you want to swap that bowl out, maybe give it a bit of a dry, so that you can continue to coat a larger batch in sugar without it clumping. You'll see here we've got now a great tray of our sugar and sour dusted grapes. I'm going to go ahead and really quick pop these into my freezer. And through a little bit of Hollywood magic, I've got the batch that I made just earlier this morning. You can see these still have that great crystalline coating on them of sour and sweet. And we're going to give one of them a try here real quick. Wow. If you are anything like me, I grew up in the time of Sour Patch Kids, Atomic Sour Warheads. This flavor is so deeply nostalgic. The freezing of the grapes tends to break up some of the cells in the grapes themselves, and it makes for a really sort of nice soft freeze. So it's not too hard, but it's also not too soft. The sugar content is fantastic. And more importantly, the pucker is wonderful from this ratio. Now, if you find that you want a little bit less pucker, always, feel free to decrease the ratio of citric acid to sugar. Or you can try, different combinations of grapes as well. Cotton candy grapes especially work fantastically with this recipe. The other thing I love about this recipe in its simplicity is it leaves open your own interpretation. So if you've got like a vanilla sugar at home, that's a fantastic mix in with your coating. Or things like tahine. I'm trying to kind of perfect that recipe at home right now to get the ratios right. But I love that sort of spicy, salty, sweet, and sour flavor that comes from a spice blend like that. So yeah, that's frozen sour grapes, a quick, easy, wonderful recipe to make at home. After they're frozen for about 2 or 3 hours in your freezer, you'll want to make sure that you do store them in a freezer tight container like this, or sort of like a freezer safe Ziploc. And those will last, well, they'll keep in your freezer for up to 6 months. I doubt they will last that long if your household is anything like mine. Yeah, so find this recipe, of course, in our newsletter or in the resources that you'll get after this class as well. And I open the floor to any questions.
So Jadrian, we have one that just picks right up on how long do these stay fresh in the freezer, which is, does it change the texture if you defrost a bit for children?
It will slightly it will make them a little bit less kind of frozen crunchy, and they're still just as delicious. I've actually made this recipe and taken them on a beach day before as well. And if you're doing that, I recommend keeping your container of them under your bag of ice in your cooler. But when they do defrost a little bit, you still get that great like sour pucker, the sweetness. There's a little bit of that kind of slushy mixture inside still, but it's not quite a hard freeze. So it will affect the texture. It'll make them a little slushier, but it does not make them any less delicious.
Wonderful, thank you. Laura asks, what is the source for your citric acid?
I actually picked this up at my local supermarket, but you can also find it on Amazon. When you are picking up citric acid, just make sure that you're getting a food grade citric acid. Citric acid is made pretty much from lemon juice as well. And they are, there's a food grade citric acid, and there's also like industrial strength citric acid that you do not want to use when you're preserving food. It's a fantastic pantry ingredient to have all around. You'll see it used in a lot of food preservation recipes, but also it's great for like descaling your water kettles and things like that.
Wonderful, thank you. Someone asked, how do Concord grapes taste? Have you tried it with those?
I have not personally tried it with Concord grapes, but I imagine that would be pretty amazing. What I remember from Concord grapes is they're a bit like earthier, but also very sweet. And I think that sweetness would really hold up well to the tartness of the coating. If you do try it, definitely let us know how it works.
Great. Those are the questions in the Q&A. Do others want to either just unmute and speak up, or raise your hands if you have more questions for Jadrian? All right, so clear. I got to tell you, like, the nostalgia burst is exactly right. That sweet tarts, that was my reward for like making it through a swim class.
And I will say this is a fantastic recipe to use with other fruits as well. I have tried this with mangoes, with pineapples. We had somebody who was asking about cherries. I think there are a lot of really delicious fruits that would hold up well to this sort of like sweet and sour coating to turn it into a bit of a fruit candy. So I encourage you to experiment.
Great. And someone mentions, Linda mentions in the Q&A that she has Emeryville pinks, but they do have little seeds. And obviously this is a whole group. Great.
Yeah. I think if you're fine dealing with the seeds, that's no problem. Most of the grapes we find these days are seedless, but a little seed never hurt anyone, especially when the grapes are so sweet.
So the texture isn't hard. They're going to be something that you can just bite into, so you don't need to defrost them before you eat them?
I will say it's not like a slush when they're directly out of the freezer. It's a bit of the freeze texture of like I want to say popsicle, but there's so many different popsicles that have so many different sort of hardness and softnesses. But it's definitely, you're not going to like be crunching your teeth into it. So it is a soft to mid sort of freeze.
Great. Well, I don't see any more open questions, so why don't we go on? And again, we can always take more questions on any part of the program or anything else food preservation related, I guess, at the end. Robin?
Sounds great.
Okay, so it's going to take me a minute or two as I go through all of these options. And hopefully I end up. So how does it look? Does it look okay? All right. So we've come to the final presentation, and my presentation is on strawberry fruit leather. My goal today is to teach you to create a portable and high energy snack that everyone will love. Fruit leather is a great way to use leftover canned fruit and slightly overripe fresh fruit. Apples, apricots, berries, cherries, nectarines, peaches, plums, and strawberries are all good choices. It also works well for some fruits that we think of as vegetables, like tomatoes. Citrus doesn't work well as a main ingredient, especially grapefruit, which may have a bitter flavor when dried. But the juice from lemons and oranges perks up the flavor when added to other fruit combinations. Use your imagination. Many fruit combinations make absolutely delicious fruit leather. I used some of last season's strawberries that I had frozen, and I added to it some banana from the counter. It ended up not being that flavorful, so I added a little orange juice to perk it up and a bit of honey. The color turned out to be amazing. If I didn't have enough puree, I could have extended it with some applesauce. Applesauce is just the right consistency and contains pectin, which will enhance the flexibility of your fruit leather. It also has a mild flavor that works with many fruit combinations. I redid the recipe recently with fresh strawberries and a banana. I had to add the banana because I didn't have quite a pint of berries. You'll want to practice good hygiene, so the first thing you'll do is wash your hands, clean and sanitize your counters, wash your dishes with hot soapy water, pop on a clean apron, and tie back your hair. You want to select ripe or slightly overripe fruit. Thoroughly rinse soft-skinned fruit or scrub hard-skinned fruit under cool running water. You'll want to remove any blemishes in the seeds and the stems. Peel fruit like apples, oranges, peaches, and pears. Dehydration inhibits the growth of bacteria and fruit spoilage by depriving microorganisms of water, which they need to grow and thrive. Pre-cooking is not normally required, although if you are dehydrating tomatoes, you may want to cook down the puree so that it is thick enough. You may also want to pre-cook fresh fruit like strawberries that come without a peel. This provides some further protection against bacteria and molds that may be present on the fruit. Cut your fruit into pieces and either steam or microwave the fruit until a thermometer placed in the fruit registers 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Preheating also stops the maturing action of enzymes in the fruit, helps preserve the fruit's natural color, and speeds up the drying process. You want to puree your fruit in a blender or food processor. The finished product should be about the consistency of applesauce or a little drier. You can add a half a teaspoon of ascorbic acid crystals or 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per 2 cups of puree. That will help preserve the color of lighter colored fruits. If the puree doesn't taste sweet enough, add 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey, corn syrup, or sugar, again per 2 cups of puree. Honey and corn syrup provide the best results since they won't crystallize during the dehydration process. You can also add a small amount of spice depending on your mixture or the fruits that you've decided to use. Cinnamon or nutmeg would be a good choice with, an apple or a pumpkin preparation. Spray a cookie sheet or similar flat tray with just a hint of vegetable oil. I used too much the first time and my leather turned out to be unpleasantly greasy. You can also cover your tray with plastic wrap or parchment paper. Again, though, you will need to spray it or wipe on just a whisper of vegetable oil. You can use the specially designed plastic sheets for your electric dehydrator, which I did here. I tried silicone sheets that I purchased online, but they didn't work well. The leather stuck just as much to the silicone as it did to my plastic sheets, and the leather seemed to take longer to dehydrate. Maybe the plastic kind of heats up a little bit, which the silicone won't do. So I'm going to stick in the future with the plastic sheet that came with my dehydrator. Whatever you use, make sure that the sheets or trays have edges so that the puree won't spill out the sides. For good air circulation, the sheet should be at least 2 inches smaller than the oven or dehydrator. Spread your puree evenly to a depth of 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Shallower is better than thicker. If the puree is too thick, the outer layers will form a crust and interfere with the drying of the center. So better to add in layers. So you can do a very thin layer and start dehydrating for an hour or two. Once that it seems pretty dry, you can add another layer. Once the layers no longer form an indent, okay, so that's one of the ways you can test. So if your layer doesn't form an indent, then you can add another layer. My tray held about 2 to 2.5 cups of puree. A 12 by 17-inch tray that would work on a different dehydrator will hold about 2 cups. It's not a precise method of food preservation. Your drying time is going to depend on the equipment, the moisture content of your fruit preparation, and the humidity in the air. You don't have to use a food dehydrator. You can also use your oven if it will maintain a low enough temperature, about 140 to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. You will need to prop open the door and place a fan outside but blowing into the oven to create good air circulation and dissipate the humidity from your wet preparation. If your oven has a convection setting and you can keep the door propped open, you can use a convection setting. Note that leaving the oven door open is not a great idea if you have small children or pets in your home. In any event, you don't want the oven to be too hot or the leather will develop a crust. And that, when I suggested when it was too thick, will stop the interior from drying. Leave at least 2 inches clearance between trays and 3 inches between racks if you want to use more than one. Rotate your trays every hour or two. It will take quite a bit of time, about 4 to 10 hours. If you use a food dehydrator, follow the manufacturer's instructions. Mine, as you can see, if you have very good eyesight, recommends a temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. The manual recommends a drying time of 4 to 6 hours. Periodically test your fruit leather for dryness. When done, your fruit leather should feel slightly tacky to the touch, and it should peel easily from the tray. You shouldn't be able to make an indentation with your finger. Test the dryness in several places. It should dry from the outside in. If the leather cracks or chips, uh-oh, it has dried too long, but yay, it's still edible. After loosening the leather, roll it into one piece or cut it into individual slices and roll them up. Now, if you're wondering what happened to the red fruit leather, this is the one I did with mangoes and pineapples, and so that's why it's orange and not red. So you can see I placed the strips or rolls into a glass container, but you can also use a plastic bag or a plastic container. Until the leather is completely dry, though, don't seal the plastic bag or tighten the lid of the container completely. If it doesn't dry completely, it may become sticky or develop a mold growth. Store your leather in a cool, dry, dark place once it's dried. It will retain good quality for up to a year in the freezer, several months in the dehydrator, and 1 to 2 months even at room temperature. But if your fruit leather is anywhere as delicious as mine was, it isn't going to last anywhere near that long. Have some fun. I cut a sheet of fruit leather into shapes with a cookie cutters. Cutting the fruit leather turned out to be not so easy. It's leather after all. I had the most success using a mallet. So you can't use a cookie cutter that has a handle on it. So you'll need one like this that has edges that you can tamp down individually. The process ended up reminding me very strongly of doing leather projects with the Scouts. Okay, so I'm ready for some questions. Marina, do you have any questions? I'm going to stop the share.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have a question. You mentioned about an indent. I think it was earlier when you were talking about the trays in the food dehydrator. And can you explain that more? Or Linda, if I just mauled your question, please
Oh,
unmute
I
it.
don't know. It's indent. You do need, if whatever trays or container you use, you need to have edges to make sure that your stuff doesn't goop out over the edges. The indent also could be, part of the process of checking to see whether it has dried. And I kind of mentioned 2 time periods when you would do this. One would be if you've decided that it's too thick and you want to try doing it in layers, then before you add an extra layer, check to see whether the fruit leather has stopped indenting, so it's not that soft anymore. Or at the very end, you're testing to see whether it's dried. And one of the ways to test is that you can't, when you touch it with your finger, you can't make a little dent in it. So I hope that answers the question.
Linda, is that what you needed? Okay, well, I'm going to take silences. I don't have anything else in the queue. Do people have more questions about leathers?
Now, leathers, unlike we were working with the watermelon rinds in the sugar syrup, are not relying on the sugar. They're relying on the being dehydrated. So you don't need to have sweet things, and you don't need, if you have somebody who is diabetic and can have fruits but can't use sweetened fruits, then don't add any sweetener. You can also do it with like a tomato kind. You can make it with tomatoes and maybe try a little Italian seasoning in there. It might be kind of interesting to try something a little bit different.
I just wanted to say this is a great chance to use some of that citric acid that you might have ordered to make Jadrian's grapes, because depending on the fruit, that extra little, can really perk up a little fruit puree if you're putting it in. I also literally just put in all sorts of stuff, like I sprinkle coconut flakes on the top. I've put in sunflower seeds, just you can dry it up in the leathers and it makes for, it adds a little protein and,
And
changes
once the
flavor.
fall comes, you can try pumpkin too. Pumpkin also makes, I didn't mention it because it isn't really summertime. But once you move into the fall, a little bit of pumpkin seasoning with some nutmeg or cinnamon, kind of when you're starting to feel, what's the time of the year when you have your pumpkin spice latte, you can create your pumpkin spice fruit leather. So
Right. I do have an open question for the participants. Someone, I think, had a question in the Q&A, but it wasn't a question. It was a source of being able to dry or dehydrate watermelon rinds, and then it disappeared before I had a chance to capture it and or post it for everyone. If that's any of you, I would love it if you unmuted and shared this additional way of preserving watermelon rinds.
Yeah, hi. It is from South Dakota State University Extension. And if you just look for preserving watermelon, it will come up. And it looks like it's a nice way to preserve rinds without a bunch of sugar, which was part of that conversation. So that's what I got curious about. And then I also found that then when you're going to use it, there's some really nice recipes for Indian curries that include watermelon rind. So I'm actually going to try that tonight because I have a big watermelon sitting on my counter.
Wow, that sounds great. If you have the link for that, if you can throw it in the Q&A, I'll post it out to everyone.
I will try to do that. I'm on a new device that behaves differently than my old one. So.
Yes. But again, notice that there's canning, which we think of when we talk about food preservation a lot, and that does give you that shelf stability. But freezing and drying are just two of the easiest, most flexible ways that you can preserve food. And so, don't ever think that just, food preservation means a lot of equipment and process. It can
and
be
fruit
very
leather's
simple.
very light to carry. So you're not carrying that glass jar. So you can take it along with you when you're going on a hike or tuck it into the lunch pail of your, favorite grandchild.
Do we have any other questions related to these three presentations or summer fruits as we reach the, not quite the end, although public school kids have started back where we are.
Yeah, next Tuesday. But it is lovely that, it's finally the weather is heated up in the Bay Area, and I'm starting to get some of my vegetables and some tomatoes. And we have, if you're getting an onslaught of tomato like I am, I think our next online presentation is Tomatoes 1. And when is that, Marina?
We have a tomato program. Oh, you're going to ask me an actual date.
Okay, wait a minute. I can reshare.
Oh, the 19th. It's August the 19th at the time. I think it is at.
Well, I'm going to share a slide, which was really not fair. I can go back and share
that's right.
my
You've got
slide.
future events. But before you go there, we've got a couple of questions that have come in. Someone, Linda asked about grapes and fruit leather. Any thoughts to our grape and fruit leather experts?
It wasn't listed among the recommended ones because you're going to have issues with those peels, and peeling each individual grape can be a real challenge. So I suppose you could cook them and kind of scrape the pulp out, but I'm not sure that I would think of grapes as a great fruit leather component.
Adrian, do you have thoughts?
I don't know. It feels like a worthy experiment. I wonder if, grapes definitely have a very high water content, but I think potentially if you blended the whole grapes up used the cooking method to reduce some of that water content, they might still be successful. I'm really curious to give this a try myself, and it might stem from, you know, some of the favorite fruit roll-ups that I had growing up were
Yeah.
grape flavored, even though I'm sure that some of those components would have been maybe more stone fruit or apple as well. But I could be a worthy experiment.
Yeah.
Of course.
Deanne points out that she does this with slip skin grapes. And so
Oh,
we
okay.
have,
I've
we
never
have
heard of those.
experience in the room that this works. Thank you, Deanne. And Deanne also has an unrelated fruit question, but the question is, if we are not to can onion roots or carrots with peels, why do we get to use them to make stock? So switch off the fruit part of your brain and think savory.
Is this just to make stock in general or to make stock for preserving? Because I think, you know, when you're just making stock for like a soup or something like that, that you're probably going to use fairly quickly and you're not preserving it. The skin of onions and carrots can provide a lot of delicious flavor there. And if you are bringing your stock up to a boil, you're still going to get to a potential point that, you know, any of the pathogens, some of the contaminants that you might have found. Well, hopefully you're washing those skins before you use them, but you're still going to get to a point that you'd be out of the danger zone of any pathogens or contaminants on those, while still providing a lot of flavor to your stock, even if the texture of an onion skin or the texture of the skin of a carrot might not necessarily be something that you would want in, you know, to actually like eat.
So Deanne is clarifying if you want to can the stock. I think we actually have, I want to say, do we have actually a Facebook post or something that actually pointed out that we can freeze, you can throw all of your veggie trimmings into just a baggie in the freezer and just keep collecting them. I mean, wash your vegetables before you do that, and then you can just take all of those peels and turn them into a stock, and then you can this would be a low acid stock, and so you're going to need to use a pressure canning method. But we do have a number of approved recipes for both meat and vegetable broths for canning. I hope that's helpful. And I am going to post the watermelon preserving without sugar recipe that Sarah Donaldson has found for us in the Q&A. We have one more question on the watermelon rind pickles. Where can I find watermelon with thick or thicker watermelons? It seems like it would need to be an older variety. I think Betty's basically asking about a lot of watermelons we find now have, you know, they've bred them to try to make the minimum rind. And we really want to find those thicker ones. Any suggestions?
I would say check your farmer's market. That would be my first go-to. A lot of the farmers have access to stuff like that, heirlooms and all that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Or your produce people, they'll probably know more about the fruit that they have available.
And it's probably going to be an old-fashioned variety too. It's not going to be one of those seedless Japanese ones that are very tiny.
Mhm. Yeah, this is Sarah. What I was thinking, I think I remember the thick rinds being more in the longer football shaped watermelons versus the round watermelons.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think let's see. Just trying to see if we have any more open questions. I think we have the queue cleared. So a
Okay,
last call
so-
for questions. All right, Robin, we've got some information on when that tomato class is.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I shouldn't be, extemporaneous, because I'm always getting into trouble. So, okay, so here's our free upcoming online program. So we have our Tomato 1 class on Tuesday, August 19th at 7:00 p.m. Our Tomato 2 class is on Tuesday, September 2nd at 7:00 p.m. We have also a Ask a Master Food Preserver session, and that's on Wednesday, September 3rd at 7:00. And you can find more information about these events and specifically what is going to be covered in Tomato 1 versus Tomato 2 if you look at the mfp.ucanr.edu events page. Please sign up for our monthly newsletter. As Jadrian so wisely pointed out, we've got lots of hints and recipes and ideas and sometimes even food history. Likewise, like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. And also, come and be one of us. If you love to preserve, then you would be a great candidate to potentially join us. And there's a link here about how to volunteer for the class and to get the appropriate training. You will find today that when you depart the Zoom session, a survey will pop up in your browser. Please help us. We love your input. It helps us to fine-tune our delivery of programming. And thank you for your time and interest. I'm going to stop share again and
Wonderful,
check
thank
in
you.
with the gang.
And I'm going to put the QR code for that survey into the chat as well.
It was in the chat originally.
It
You
was
can redo
earlier,
it
but
again.
for
Yeah.
any latecomers or people who don't like to
Yes.
scroll back, there it is in chat. Any final questions or thoughts?
Well, thank you for coming and sharing some time with us, some food preserving fun on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And I hope we've, shared with you some things that would make your food preserving afternoons a little more fun.